The night sky stretched endless above Jiho's small house at the edge of town. Stars winked through gaps in the pine trees as he wiped grease from his hands after a long day fixing engines at his workshop. Something about tonight felt different, a heaviness in the air like the world was holding its breath. Jiho walked to his back porch and looked up. His father had taught him the constellations when he was young before Dad got sick. That knowledge stayed with him, a connection to simpler times. Tonight, one star seemed to move, growing brighter against the dark canvas above. "That's not right," Jiho whispered to himself, squinting. The light wobbled, then streaked downward, trailing fire across the sky. Not a star, something else entirely. The object crashed with a distant thud that Jiho felt in his chest. Birds erupted from the forest. Behind his house, their panic visible even in the darkness. Without thinking, Jiho grabbed his flashlight and jacket, slipping on his boots as he hurried into the woods. The smell hit him first. Something metallic and strange, like hot electronics and burnt sugar. Jiho followed a path of broken branches and scorched undergrowth. His heart pounded as his flashlight beam caught something reflecting through the trees, something that didn't belong in these woods. The clearing appeared suddenly. Trees had been flattened in a perfect circle, and at the center sat what could only be described as a ship, not like any airplane Jiho had ever seen in books or movies. This was smaller, roughly the size of his workshop, with a sleek silver surface that seemed to absorb his flashlight beam rather than reflect it. "Hello?" Jiho called out, his voice sounding small in the night air. "Is anyone hurt?" A section of the craft's surface rippled like water, then parted. Jiho stepped back, nearly tripping over an exposed root. Should he run? Call someone? But who would believe him? A figure emerged slowly from the opening. In the dim light, Jiho could make out a slender form, humanoid but definitely not human. The being had pale blue skin that seemed to glow faintly, with large eyes that reflected his flashlight in a way that reminded Jiho of a cat's eyes at night. Jiho froze, unable to move as the figure stumbled forward and collapsed onto the forest floor. Only then did he notice the dark liquid seeping from a wound on the being's side. Blood, but with a silvery quality that caught the flashlight beam. "You're hurt," Jiho said, moving closer despite his fear. The being looked up, those large eyes focusing on him with an intelligence that was unmistakable. Female, Jiho thought, though he couldn't say why he was certain of that. She tried to speak, but the sounds were unlike any language Jiho had ever heard. Musical clicks and soft tones that made his ears tingle. She gestured toward the ship, then back to the woods, making a motion like someone chasing her. "Someone did this to you?" Jiho asked, pointing to her wound. "Someone's after you?" The alien nodded, a surprisingly human gesture that made Jiho's chest tighten with sympathy. The universal language of fear needed no translation. In the distance, Jiho heard voices and saw flashlight beams dancing between trees. Whoever had hurt this visitor was coming to finish what they started. "Come with me," Jiho said, helping the alien to her feet. "I can hide you." She was lighter than she looked, as if her bones were hollow like a bird's. She leaned against him as they moved, quickly through the underbrush, away from the approaching lights and voices. "I'm Jiho," he said, tapping his chest as they moved. It seemed important somehow to offer his name. "Nari," she responded, the sound clear despite her obvious pain. She tapped her own chest, mimicking his gesture. They reached Jiho's house just as trucks rumbled down the dirt road nearby. Jiho helped Nari through the back door and into his workshop, where engine parts and tools cluttered every surface. She seemed fascinated by the simple machinery, touching a carburetor with delicate fingers that Jiho now noticed had an extra joint. "You need to stay hidden," Jiho explained, showing her a space behind a large tool cabinet. "Those men, they're looking for you." Through the window, Jiho could see men with hunting gear moving toward the forest led by Park Day, a local businessman with a reputation for getting what he wanted, no matter the cost. Jiho had fixed his trucks before, never liking the cold look in the man's eyes. As the search party disappeared into the trees, Jiho turned back to find Nari studying a photograph of his family, mother, father, and himself as a child, standing proudly beside the first engine they'd rebuilt together. Family, Jiho explained, pointing to each face. Nari's eyes seemed to soften. She pointed to the night sky visible through the workshop window, then held up 3 fingers. Your family, 3 of them? Jiho asked. Up there? She nodded, then winced as her wound started bleeding again. Jiho grabbed his first aid kit from under the workbench. He didn't know if human medicine would help an alien, but he had to try something. As he cleaned the strange silvery blood from her blue skin, Jiho realized his life had changed forever. Whatever happened next, he couldn't let Park Day and his men find her. For the first time since his father died, Jiho felt a sense of purpose stronger than his fear. Morning light filtered through the dusty windows of Jiho's workshop. He hadn't slept much, checking on Nari every hour as she rested in the makeshift bed he'd created from old blankets and couch cushions. Her wound had stopped bleeding sometime during the night, the edges already starting to heal in a way that seemed impossibly fast. Jiho sipped his coffee, watching as Nari examined a collection of tools on his workbench with careful fingers. She picked up a wrench, turning it over and studying its shape with intense curiosity. It's for fixing things, Jiho explained, though he knew she couldn't understand his words. He took the wrench and mimicked tightening a bolt. See? It helps. Grip things that are round. Nari nodded, then pointed to a different tool, her head tilted in question. Screwdriver, Jiho said, demonstrating its use as well. They continued this way through breakfast, Jiho showing her everyday objects, Nari repeating their names with her musical accent. She learned quickly and by midday knew at least 30 Earth words. Food? Jiho asked, opening his refrigerator to show her the options. Nari pointed to a bowl of fruit, selecting an apple with careful fingers. She sniffed it before taking a small bite, her eyes widening with delight at the taste. Good, she said, one of her new words. Good food. Jiho smiled, feeling strangely proud of this small connection. After lunch, Nari gestured toward the woods where her ship had crashed. Jiho shook his head. Not safe, he said, keeping his words simple. Bad man still looking. He pulled out a newspaper from that morning, showing her the headline. Strange lights reported near forest. Local businessman leads investigation. Park Day's smiling face stared up from the page, his eyes cold despite the friendly expression. The article mentioned possible meteor activity and scientific interest. But Jiho knew better. Nari studied the photo and tensed visibly. She pointed to Park Day, then made a grabbing motion and pointed to herself. He tried to catch you? Jiho asked. Before the crash? Nari nodded, her large eyes darkening with what Jiho recognized as fear. She made more gestures, her ship flying, something chasing it, forcing it down. They shot you down, Jiho realized. Park Day somehow knew you were coming. Nari touched a small device on her wrist that Jiho had assumed was jewelry. It glowed, faintly as she manipulated its surface. Suddenly, the air between them shimmered, and a 3-dimensional image appeared, a star map that Jiho didn't recognize, with one particular star highlighted. Home? Jiho asked, pointing to the bright spot. Nari nodded, then expanded the image to show a blue-green planet. She pointed to herself, then the planet, her expression a mixture of longing and worry. You need to get back, Jiho said softly. Your people must be looking for you. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted them. Jiho peeked through the curtains to see Park Day's expensive black truck pulling into his driveway. 2 men in hunting clothes sat in the cab with him. Hide, Jiho whispered urgently, pointing to his bedroom. Quick! Nari moved silently into the other room while Jiho kicked her blankets under the couch and straightened his tools. He opened the front door just as Park Day was about to knock. Mr. Park, Jiho said, forcing a polite smile. What brings you here? Park's eyes scanned the workshop behind Jiho, just checking on my neighbors after all the excitement last night. You see anything unusual? Lights in the sky, maybe? Jiho shrugged. I was asleep early. Long day at the shop. Park nodded, but his eyes continued to search the room. Mind if we look around? We're organizing a search party for the meteor. Scientific interest, you understand? Actually, I'm in the middle of a job, Jiho said, gesturing to an engine block on his workbench. Customer needs it by tomorrow. Park's smile tightened. Won't take but a minute. Before Jiho could protest, one of the men pushed past him into the workshop. Jiho's heart hammered in his chest as the man walked around, lifting tarps and peering. Behind cabinets. What exactly are you looking for? Jiho asked, trying to sound merely curious rather than terrified. You'll know it when you see it, Park replied, running a finger along Jiho's bookshelf. Something, not from around here. The second man emerged from checking Jiho's bathroom. Nothing, he reported. Park looked disappointed but nodded. If you see anything unusual, you call me directly. Good business opportunity for both of us. He handed Jiho a card with his private number. After they left, Jiho locked the door and leaned against it, exhaling, slowly. They're gone, he called. Nari appeared in the doorway, holding something in her hand, a small drawing she'd made while hiding. It showed Jiho with a smile on his face, standing beside what looked like her spaceship. Next to them were simple figures representing Park and his men, with X marks through them. We fix, she said in her musical voice, tapping the drawing of the ship. Go home. Jiho nodded slowly, an idea forming. He was good with engines, with making broken things work again. Maybe, just maybe, he could help repair her ship. Yes, he said, feeling a new sense of purpose. We fix, together. Nari's smile lit up her face, making her seem less alien and more like a friend from somewhere very far away. Jiho realized that despite the danger, despite how strange everything about this situation was, he was glad she had crashed near his home. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone anymore. Jiho tightened the last bolt on his truck's undercarriage and slid out from beneath it. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. 3 days had passed since Nari arrived, and though her wound had almost completely healed, they hadn't risked going back to her ship yet. Park Day's men had been patrolling the woods constantly. Ready? Jiho asked, wiping his hands on a rag. Nari nodded. She wore Jiho's old baseball cap and jacket, her blue skin hidden under gloves and a face mask. Anyone who noticed her unusual eyes might think she was wearing fancy contact lenses. We just need to grab a few parts from your ship, Jiho explained as they climbed into the truck. Then we can fix it here. Nari had been learning Korean phrases rapidly, absorbing language like a sponge. Dangerous, she said, looking toward the forest. Park Day is watching. That's why we're going after dark, Jiho replied, starting the engine, and why we're taking the back trail. As they drove slowly with the headlights off, guided only by moonlight, Jiho thought about his friend Chohana. She worked at the local observatory and knew more about space than anyone he'd ever met. Maybe she could help them, but telling anyone about Nari was risky. The truck rumbled to a stop at the edge of the forest. Through the trees, they could see flashlight beams where Park's men were guarding the crash site. More than yesterday, Jiho whispered. They've doubled the guards. Nari touched Jiho's arm and pointed to a different path through the woods. Another way, she said softly. Her eyes seemed to shine in the darkness, able to see things Jiho couldn't. They crept through the underbrush, Nari moving with perfect silence while Jiho tried not to snap twigs under his boots. After 15 minutes of careful walking, they reached a small ridge overlooking the crash site. Park Day himself stood near the ship, directing men who were setting up equipment around it, lights, cameras, and what looked like scientific instruments. 2 men in suits stood nearby, talking in low voices. Government people, Jiho whispered. This is worse than I thought. Suddenly, a spotlight swept across the ridge where they were hiding. Jiho pulled Nari down just in time. Let's check the perimeter again, came a voice from below. Boss thinks someone might try to interfere. Jiho and Nari retreated through the forest as quietly as they could. When they reached the truck, 3 men with flashlights were waiting beside it. That's Kim's truck, one said. What's it doing out here? Jiho pulled Nari behind a thick oak tree. "We need another plan," he whispered. They circled wide around the search party, heading deeper into the forest instead of back toward the road. Jiho's knowledge of these woods from childhood explorations was their only advantage now. After an hour of difficult hiking, they emerged at the edge of town, near the small regional observatory where Hana worked. Lights still glowed in the windows, despite the late hour. "My friend," Jiho explained to Nari. "She might help us." Hana's surprised face appeared when she opened the door. "Jiho? What are you doing here so late?" Her eyes widened when she noticed Nari standing half-hidden behind him. "And who's this?" "I need your help," Jiho said simply. "Can we come in? It's not safe outside." Once inside, with the doors locked and blinds drawn, Jiho explained everything. Hana sat in stunned silence as Nari removed her disguise, revealing her blue skin and otherworldly features. "This is impossible," Hana whispered, but her face showed wonder rather than fear. "An actual extraterrestrial visitor. Park Day shot down her ship," Jiho explained. "Now he's got government people looking at it. We need to repair it so she can go home." Hana, ever practical, recovered quickly from her shock. "They'll be looking for both of you now. You can't go back to your place, Jiho." "I know," he admitted. "We just need somewhere to hide while we figure this out." Hana thought for a moment. "The observatory has an old storage basement. Nobody uses it anymore. You could stay there while we work on this." Nari stepped forward and touched the star chart on Hana's desk. With careful movements, she pointed out constellations, then indicated one particular star. "That's where you're from?" Hana asked, scientific curiosity overtaking her initial shock. "That's in the Cassiopeia constellation, about 40 light-years away." Nari nodded, then used her wrist device to project the same star map Jiho had seen before. "Incredible," Hana breathed. "Your navigation technology alone is beyond anything we have." Their planning was interrupted by the sound of vehicles pulling into the observatory parking lot. Peering through the blinds, Jiho saw Park Day's truck, along with a government SUV. "They must have followed us," Jiho said, his heart sinking. "Or guessed we'd come here." Hana grabbed her keys. "Quick, through the back. There's a maintenance tunnel that connects to the main building. We can reach the basement from there." As they slipped out the rear door, they could hear Park Day's voice at the front entrance, demanding to search the premises. "He won't stop looking for you," Jiho told Nari as they hurried through the dark tunnel. "Whatever's in your ship, he wants it badly." "Not ship," Nari replied, touching her chest. "Me. Knowledge here. Dangerous if he gets." Jiho nodded grimly. The stakes had just gotten higher. Now they weren't just trying to help Nari get home. They were preventing Park Day from getting alien technology that he would surely misuse. As Hana secured the basement door behind them, Jiho realized their simple plan had turned into something much more complicated. They were fugitives now, hunted by powerful people with resources. But looking at Nari's determined face in the dim basement light, Jiho knew he couldn't turn back. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Week passed in the observatory basement. The small space had become their workshop, living quarters, and hideout all in one. Jiho had managed to retrieve some tools from his truck before abandoning it, and Hana brought food and supplies whenever she could slip away without raising suspicion. The basement walls were covered with their plans, drawings of Nari's ship, lists of parts they needed, and star charts showing her home system. In the corner sat the pieces they had salvaged during 2 dangerous night missions to the crash site. Each trip had been riskier than the last as Park Day's security tightened. Jiho wiped sweat from his forehead as he examined the alien power cell they'd recovered. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen, a smooth crystalline object that hummed with energy. "I think I understand how it connects now," he said, more to himself than to Nari, who sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, carefully repairing the navigation system with Hana. Nari looked up and smiled. Her Korean had improved dramatically, allowing for real conversations now. "You are good with machines, Jiho. Cars and spaceships aren't so different," he joked. "Just different kinds of engines." Hana entered through the hidden door, carrying a backpack full of food and a troubled expression. "What's wrong?" Jiho asked immediately. Hana set down the backpack. "They're moving the ship tomorrow. Park Day convinced the government officials that his research facility has better equipment for studying it." She pulled out her phone and showed them a news article. "He's calling it the scientific discovery of the century." Jiho's heart sank. "If they move it to his facility, we'll never get to it." "That's not all," Hana continued. "There's a reward now for information about suspicious persons seen near the crash site. Your description is all over the local news, Jiho." Nari stood up, her face serious. "I have caused too much trouble for you both." "Don't talk like that," Jiho said firmly. "None of this is your fault." But as night fell and Hana returned to her apartment, Jiho sat alone watching Nari sleep on the makeshift bed they'd created. Her face looked peaceful despite everything, the soft blue glow of her skin providing the only light in the darkness. Jiho thought about his life before. Nari crashed into it. Quiet days fixing engines, evenings spent alone reading or watching the stars. Simple and safe. Now he was a fugitive, risking everything for someone he'd known only days. Yet somehow it felt right. More right than anything had felt since his father died. Morning came with the sound of Hana rushing into the basement, her face pale with worry. "They've started questioning observatory staff," she said breathlessly. "They know something's going on here. It's only a matter of time before they search this building." Jiho nodded, a calm resolve settling over him. "Then we need to move now. Today." "But the ship parts aren't ready," Hana protested. "We still need the main engine component." "I've been thinking about that," Jiho said, spreading out their diagrams on the table. "We don't need to fix the whole ship, just the emergency pod section. It's smaller, but it should be enough to get Nari into orbit. From there, her people can find her." Nari looked over the plans, her eyes wide with understanding. "This could work, but very dangerous for you, Jiho. More dangerous for you if you stay," he replied softly. As they discussed the details, Jiho felt a strange ache forming in his chest. If this worked, Nari would leave Earth, leave him. It was the right thing, the only thing to do, but the thought made the basement feel suddenly colder. That evening they made final preparations. Hana had discovered that Park Day's men would begin moving the ship at dawn. They would have one chance to reach it before then. "I'm coming with you," Hana insisted as they packed the repaired components. Jiho shook his head. "Too risky. If we're all caught, there's no one left to help. You need to create a distraction at the main observatory. Get them looking in the wrong direction." Hana didn't like it, but finally agreed. She hugged them both before leaving to prepare, whispering, "Be careful," in Jiho's ear. Alone again, Jiho found Nari staring at the small window that showed a patch of night sky. "Are you afraid?" he asked, standing beside her. "Yes," she admitted, "but also sad." "Because you're going home?" Nari turned to face him. "Home is good, but leaving you—" She struggled for the right words. "You saved me. You are first human to see me as person, not thing to study." "You're the most amazing person I've ever met," Jiho said simply. "Human or not." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unsaid things hanging between them. Jiho wanted to ask her to stay but knew he couldn't. Her people were waiting, probably searching the stars for her even now. "Whatever happens tonight," Jiho finally said, "I'm glad your ship crashed near my house." Nari's eyes shimmered in the dim light. She reached out and placed her hand against his chest right over his heart. "This part of Earth I will take with me," she said softly. "Always." Jiho covered her hand with his own, making his decision. He would get her home, whatever the cost, even if it meant never seeing her again, even if it meant facing Park Day and his men alone. Some things were worth risking everything for. Moonlight filtered through the trees as Jiho and Nari made their way through the forest. The repaired components from the ship weighed heavily in their backpacks. Every sound, a twig snapping, An owl calling made them freeze, hearts pounding. There, Jiho whispered, pointing through a gap in the trees. I can see the lights around. Your ship. The crash site was alive with activity despite the late hour. Floodlights bathed the area in harsh white light. 2 large trucks waited nearby, ready to transport the ship at dawn. Men with flashlights patrolled the perimeter. Too many guards, Nari said softly, her blue fingers gripping Jiho's arm. Don't worry. Hana should be starting the distraction any minute now. As if on cue, a series of bright flashes erupted from the direction of the observatory, followed by what sounded like fireworks. The night sky lit up with bursts of color, beautiful enough to draw attention. Meteor shower simulation, Jiho explained with a grin. Hana's specialty. Most of the guards turned toward the display, some even lowering their weapons to watch. Park Day emerged from a tent near the ship, barking orders at his men. Go check it out, they heard him shout. Make sure it's not a trick. Half the security team jogged off toward the observatory. Jiho nodded to Nari. Now's our chance. They circled around to the darkest side of the crash site, where the trees grew closest to the ship. Using the shadows for cover, they crept closer, freezing whenever a guard looked their way. 20 meters from the ship, a guard turned suddenly, his flashlight beam sweeping toward them. Jiho pulled Nari behind a tree just in time. The light lingered for a moment, then moved on. We need a closer distraction, Jiho whispered. He pulled out a small device he'd built from spare parts, a timer connected to a car alarm. What is that? Nari asked. Noise, Jiho said with a smile. He set the timer for 2 minutes, then tossed the device as far as he could in the opposite direction from the ship, when the alarm blared to life, shrieking into the quiet night. The remaining guards rushed toward the sound. Park Day shouted in frustration, ordering them to find whatever was causing the racket. Now, Jiho urged, and they sprinted toward the ship. They reached the damaged hull without being spotted. Nari placed her hand on a section that looked different from the rest, but it rippled at her touch, creating an opening. Inside, the ship was smaller than Jiho had imagined. Most of the space was taken up by strange machinery and damaged components. Nari moved quickly, replacing broken parts with the ones they'd repaired. Jiho helped where he could, connecting wires and securing panels as she directed. Almost done, Nari said, her fingers moving with practiced skill. Emergency systems only, but enough to reach orbit. Outside, they heard the car alarm stop and voices approaching. Time was running out. Jiho glanced at the ship's view screen, which had flickered to life, showing symbols he couldn't read. Is it working? Nari nodded, her face glowing in the light from the controls. Yes, ship can fly. She turned to face him, suddenly still. Time to say goodbye. Jiho had known this moment was coming, had prepared himself for it, but now that it was here, he found no words. Instead, he pulled a small object from his pocket. A silver pendant that had belonged to his father. Take this, he said, pressing it into her hand. So you don't forget Earth? Nari looked at the pendant, then back at Jiho. Without warning, she reached up and touched his face gently. No forgetting, she said softly. A shout from outside broke the moment. Someone's inside the ship. Get Park Day. You have to go, Jiho urged. Now. Nari hesitated, then reached for her wrist device. She pressed several controls and a small crystal detached from it. She placed it in Jiho's palm. From my world, she explained. When you look at stars, hold this. I will feel it across space. Flashlight beams probed through the ship's entrance. There was no more time. Go, Jiho said, stepping toward the opening. I'll hold them off. Nari grabbed his arm. Come with me. The offer stunned him. For a wild moment, Jiho imagined leaving Earth behind, seeing the stars up close, exploring a world with 2 suns and blue oceans. But then he thought of Hana, still at the observatory, risking her job and freedom to help them. Of his workshop, his father's tools, the life he'd built here. I can't, he said simply. But I'll never forget you. Nari nodded, understanding in her eyes. She pressed a final sequence into the ship's controls, then stepped back as a transparent barrier formed between them, sealing her in the cockpit section. Jiho backed away as the ship hummed to life. Outside, he could hear Park Day shouting orders, men rushing toward the craft. As he emerged from the ship, Jiho raised his hands in surrender, drawing all attention to himself. "Looking for me?" he called out. Park Day pushed through his men, face twisted with anger. "Where is it? The alien?" Behind Park, the ship began to glow, energy building around it. The men turned in confusion, some raising weapons. "Too late," Jiho said, smiling despite the guns pointed at him. "She's going home." The ship rose silently, hovering for just a moment. Through the transparent cockpit, Jiho saw Nari press her hand against the barrier, a final goodbye. Then the ship shot upward with impossible speed, becoming a streak of light against the night sky. The men stood frozen, watching it disappear among the stars. In the confusion, no one noticed when Hana appeared at the edge of the clearing, quietly, helping Jiho slip away into the darkness. Later, standing on Hana's rooftop with the crystal warm in his palm, Jiho watched the place where Nari's ship had vanished. The crystal glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Was it worth it? Hana asked softly beside him. Jiho smiled, eyes still on the stars. "Some things are worth everything."